La Quinta should be proud. La Quinta does a very, very good job of remembering 9/11 and those that we lost, and that's a day that radically changed the lives of all Americans. And today we've been asked to recognize, on behalf of Congressman Ruiz, the La Quinta Museum and the La Quinta Historical Society. And these certificates are in honor of memorializing the creation and development of La Quinta's 9/11 monument. On behalf of California's 36th Congressional District, thank you for your commitment to the remembrance of those lost in the tragic terrorist attacks against America by holding an annual vigil in their honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We're very proud to have been part of this and the celebration today. So now I'm going to bring up Robert Ratty, and Robert is going to introduce his panel, and they'll do their presentation.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. We just had Councilmember John Pena just joining us just on time. Apparently, we timed this entrance. John Pena was actually the mayor when the events of 9/11 occurred. And Mayor Don Adolph was the mayor when this memorial was put together, and he was a big supporter in getting this done. And what a journey it has been. I would like to introduce, first of all, thank the sponsors for this event, the La Quinta Historical Society, the City of La Quinta, and our host, the La Quinta Museum. Our panelists are Werner Becher, who is the contractor that built the memorial. We have Andrew Davis, who initiated the entire process for this memorial. Steve Howlett is with the City of La Quinta. He was instrumental in getting this done. Some of the people that work with the city has moved on, retired, but Steve is still there. And I think is the curator of this monument because they always look after it, that it stays nice and fresh, and then myself. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna start talking about the process, how this entire project came together. Many people know our monument, what it is, but they don't know how it came about. So I will invite Andrew Davis here to join us and start us off with his memories and his oral history of what has taken place.
Thank you. So this is my Eagle Scout project. I worked very hard for this for 3 years, raised over $300,000 to make this project happen. It's very dear to my heart. This is important to me because my father was almost killed in the attack. He was supposed to be there, but decided to go to another event instead. So because of that, I wanted to make this reminder for everybody that was in that tragic attack to never be forgotten, because it's such a huge mark on our history that is a very tragic event. And that's really why it spoke to me. And I felt that we needed to have a piece of it in our community. So that's why I started this project. And it did take a long time, but it was definitely worth it.
So these slides remember the council members and the entire council that was at the time of the dedication. Don Adolph was the mayor at the time, Christy Franklin was mayor pro tem, Linda Evans, Terry Anderson, the Osmond were council members. Lee sends his best regard, couldn't be here due to other engagements, and so did Terry Anderson, and they remember fondly the whole process of bringing this together. It's actually, Andrew, I will call you back here and tell us a little bit about the night that you finally received. This was part of his Eagle Scout project. I would say this was one of the most ambitious Eagle Scout project ever. And why don't you remind us of what happened that evening in 2013 when we dedicated the memorial?
That was really special. For one, I never really showed the project to really anybody before. It was sort of something I kept to myself, and only everybody that I only worked with on the project really knew about it. So when I finally revealed it to the public, my friends and my family, it was something that was very huge. A lot of people came out for it, and not only that, as I received my Eagle Scout at that time. And that's what I've been working on for a long time, and after accomplishing my project, being able to reveal that and also receiving that award at the same day definitely meant a lot to me, especially being not only having that in a small group, but in my entire community coming out to see that happen. And that's what made that just even more special than just the memorial.
Well, I remember Andrew when he was our neighbor, and he was about that tall. It's been many years since then. The evening that we're speaking of, I'm not so.
When we dedicated the memorial.
Oh, that was one of the most exciting evenings of my night, of my life, I should say. It was an honor to be able to put this project together. I spent about 8 months working on it and actually conceiving how to get it done, and it was able to be put together with the help of Robert and Steve and all of our members here today. Thank you.
Well, it was a long road. I mean, we know that. Andrew talked about that. But I remember the first time Andrew presented this to City Council. City Council, they were enthusiastic about the idea. It was, yes, whatever it takes, let's do this. They loved the idea. At that time, Councilmember Ratty was Citizen Ratty, sitting in the audience. And he heard it, and he came up after Andrew had left, and he stood up at the dais and he said, or at the lectern, and said, I volunteer, I want to help with this project. I'll pay for the shipping to get this piece of steel here. He didn't even know how big this thing was going to be. We had no idea he had no idea what he was paying for, but he said, I'll do it. He was very enthusiastic about this project, and he didn't know that he was going to become the artist for the project either. He'll talk about that, but it started out as just paying for the shipping of the steel, and then it's like, what are we going to do with the steel once it gets here? So I'll turn it back over to him, and he can tell what it took to get to that final night.
Yeah, my memory of that evening when Andrew presented to City Council, I was in the audience, as I was for many council meetings, just to listen and learn. And I remember one of whatever he was presenting to City Council, didn't see it in the audience. But I remember at the time, now Mayor Evans, at the time Council Member Evans, said, I see that on your list you have fundraiser, good one, right? That was number one. And of course, he was very aware of what it would have been taken to put something like this together. And as you have seen in the previous slide, the city of La Quinta generously, through the art in public places, put $33,000 toward this project. And thank you again to council members at the time that made this possible. Andrew raised $14,000 on his own, and plus on the day of the dedication presented, I believe, another check for $1,500. So he worked very hard to put this together. Shipment, design, engineering was paid by Reza. He used to live in La Quinta. He was doing my home, and I kind of convinced him that it would be a good idea for him to donate some of his time to do the engineering. And of course, Werner was so kind to push this ahead. So this was, it started out with, we don't know what the steel is going to look like. We knew it probably could have been a section, but in this particular case, it started out with a concept of a solemn and peaceful reflection. When I spoke with the Davis family and they told me their story, I thought that they're really a place where people could reflect. So this was really the first concept that you see here in these slides that really didn't take account of the piece of steel itself because we didn't know what it was going to be, but it was a way to kick off a thinking process. So it was an early concept. Usually men are known for doing that. First we do something, then we read the instruction, right? So, and that's pretty much a little bit what I did here. And I would like to bring up the instructions, and you don't need to read it, but I would like to have Steve come back up here and tell us about the process of receiving the artifacts from the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, because again, it needed to be done through a public agency.
Yes, so after Andrew had secured the metal piece, again, we didn't know what we were getting. We were seeing pictures of these large beams, but we weren't sure. And as part of Robert, he was trying to design something that he didn't know what he was designing for. But we received these instructions from the Port Authority of what the city needed to do. And when we contacted the Port Authority, they didn't know who we were, or what we wanted. And when we asked them, we're getting the piece of steel that Andrew secured, they didn't know what we were talking about. Evidently, there had been some misappropriations of these steels, and so they wanted to ensure that these weren't going to be taken by people who were not part of municipalities and have, I guess they were being stolen for personal gains. So I think what happened is the Port Authority just shut it all down. And so we didn't know, we had the contract in place. It was a three-person agreement between the architect, the artist, the contractor, and the city. And we didn't know that we had a piece of steel. We didn't know if we had a piece of steel. So we went around and around with the Port Authority, and then they finally found the information that Andrew had put together. And, oh yes, we do have your piece of steel, but we're not going to release it to Robert. We're not going to release it to Werner. We have to release it to the city. So then it took a letter from Mayor Don Adolph to say that, yes, the city is moving forward with this project. Yes, we have committed funds to this, and we are going to make this happen. So Don's letter was what got it back going again, but then they were going to ship the metal piece. Again, we didn't know how big this was, but we did have someone who was going to pay for it. However, they weren't going to ship it to Robert's house. So they had to ship it to the city of La Quinta, and again, we did not know what we were getting until it showed up, and we didn't even know when it was going to show up. We were trying to track this thing across the country, didn't know where it was, and then one day, boom, there it is at City Hall, there's this pallet. So I get on the phone, it's here, I'm calling everybody, it's here. Now we know what we're dealing with. So it was kind of a unique situation of we had it, we didn't have it, and then we had it again. And I think this is one of the reasons why these pieces are so rare around the country. So we were very fortunate that Andrew's persistence was able to secure it for us, so we were able to get it.
Thank you. And at the time, I remember talking to then Mayor Don Adolph, and he asked me, how is it going? I said, it's a very difficult process, I said, but this is about 9/11. It's not supposed to be easy. It is supposed to be difficult. So after basically what they told us, okay, in order for you to secure the artifact, you have to give us an idea of what it's going to look like, how you're going to treat it, how you're going to use it, and where you're going to install it, right? Yet, we don't have any idea what the artifact looks like. So here again, we go out for some ideas, right, to show to Port Authority that we are serious, the city is behind, and the site will be provided. So this was again, an evolution of the concept, which shows here the installation of a very large piece of a section of an I-beam. With a few ideas how we will commemorate, where we're going to place it, some inscription that we were thinking about, and even the site, right? With a big ambition here to put it right in the middle of the park, right? So Port Authority was convinced that this was for real. We were the city that was going to get it done. And right before what would have been the 10th anniversary of 9/11, it was, I believe, September 6th when I got the call from Steve that the segment of the artifact had arrived. And we had no idea what it was going to be, right? No pictures, nothing that we had received ahead. So that 4 days later, we held, at the time, the Cove Neighbor Association was leading the annual commemoration of 9/11. So we were able to, for the first time, exhibit the artifact for the community. And he arrived, he had a serial number, and everything was great, and we were ready to start what was number one on the list, fundraising. And so that night we made a presentation, we all spoke to those that gathered, and people started donating toward this effort. And so based on finally we have the artifact, and now we know what it looks like, how big it is. This was my first concept of what it could have been, right? And again, a lot of ambitions here. We wanted water, we wanted water feature, we wanted benches, and Steve was like, I do this every day, and I tell you that water is an issue because of the calcification. Cleaning this and keeping it polished will be an issue. So this, you can see the synergy and collaboration that was going on at the time among all parties that wanted to make this happen. So the next step was, again, the same. There was supposed to be a water feature. The water was going to fall down, being recycled, and you could sit on either side of the memorial. The city not only donated the money and the staff time, but also put up a beautiful site eventually that where we installed this. A few words about the design and development and the engineering of this. There's design and there is engineering, and the two sometimes don't get along, and we have to talk to each other. Here's what came from Reza. Again, while I donated all the work to do the design, Reza donated all his time to do the engineering. And you can see here that his first get back to me, his first round of calculation was straight pipes. Some negotiation we were able to change it so that one of the section wouldn't have to be straight, but created some issue for Werner, but he took care of it. So, he's, I always say he's the master of concrete. He makes concrete do what concrete doesn't want to do. So the next step here was, this is what the result was. On the right, you see the original concept. And on the left, you see the final design after it was engineered. So you can see a little bit of difference in size. It grew in size to accommodate all the engineering components, but the essence of the design that was presented to council and was approved by council, it remained there. So we didn't quite lose much to the process. And this was the final location that council provided for this project, and it was a beautiful pad very near to the library. And pretty much you can see this from City Hall, the library, and other points in our civic center. We have something new at the library, which is our space maker, right? Then you can do machining. You can take the file, send it to a CNC, control numerical, computer control numerical, and you can machine out a positive. Exactly what you send to the machine, it will machine it in the shape or form. But the other way is to make a mold out of it. And that's what Werner and I decided to do. We had to go down the route of making a mold. And so it is the same file. Instead of making a positive, you make a negative. So you machine out instead of on, and it can take all type of epoxy, concrete, and even some metals. So, and with that, I will pass it on to Werner to tell us about the construction.
So after we decided to make the mold, we sent the CAD up to a styrofoam manufacturing business that I found in Palm Springs, and they set it up on a CAD design, and the machine routed out the actual molds to the specifications off of is that a CAD is what we call that? So it worked out very well. These molds were so expensive, and I was so stressed about them. I was taking such good care of them. And my wife can tell you that there were storms during the times when we were putting this together, and I'd be up at midnight, I'd leave the house, and I'd go to the yard to make sure these molds were okay. And because I said, oh my God, if something happens to them. So it was a source of stress, but they were worth their weight in gold. So we fabricated a structure in my yard to suspend the steel columns from topside down. So we inverted everything and built it from topside up to the top of the frame. So the steel was hung and plumbed, and then the molds were attached to around the steel columns, and then the rebar that we had to fabricate to fit inside the mold. And inside the mold, we painted on an epoxy coating to give it a smooth surface. So you can go to the next one, Robert. There's Edie and Butler there. I remember we were having some problems with the engineered tubes to form to the molds, and I talked to Steve about it, and about the engineering. He made a phone call over to Reza's office and says, Reza, you might want to listen to Werner about a few of these things. And I did. I got my way. It's the first time I've ever had an engineer to work with me, where it worked out well for me anyway. But you can see the size of them compared to the people standing there. And once we had them all the steel put together, we closed both sides of the molds together, and we formed them up so that the concrete would stay inside the mold. We set vibrators on each of the columns, so as the concrete was going in, the matrix would shake and the air bubbles would rise to the surface and leave a nice smooth form. We can go to the next one. And this was, we put the actual columns on a truck that hauled them from my yard and craned them into the area at the park. We had pre-poured the concrete pads below the surface on the right picture, and it was kind of exciting when we had that crane out there. Everybody was all giddy about it, and I was going, I hope it works, I hope it works. But it all did manage to come together. Then we installed the base of the tower, and we chose black concrete to contrast with the white columns. A very proud crew out there. I wanted to mention when we took our first measurements, I took two of my crew members down into the basement over at the City Hall to measure the steel, and we rode down the elevator to the basement, and the doors opened, the basement was dark, and I can't remember who it was, probably Steve, but he flips the light on, and there was an audible gasp, from myself and my two crew members. And when we saw that piece of steel sitting in front of us on the floor, when I heard the gasp, I knew I had my guys signed, sealed, and delivered, man. They were totally dedicated to it. And that's the finished product right there.
For a moment, huh?
Yeah, it was fun. I wanted to add that Andrew and was in New York, and they found a picture of the memorial in the museum, and I found out that in the nation there were 7 memorials that are posted in the museum, and out of those 7, La Quinta is one of them. So it was a proud moment. Yeah.
Little story about that. After the dedication, I received a phone call of the curator of the 9/11 tribute. She has seen through the media, there was, I believe, Palm Springs Life wrote an article, The Desert Sun, that made it out. She did learn about the dedication of our monument, and she connected with me and said, I want to include it in this exhibit. I thought there were hundreds, right? And I need a picture right away. And we didn't really have a good picture, and it was at the time of the La Quinta, the art festival, right? So there were a few moving parts there, but I remember asking my wife to go down and take some pictures, and those are the pictures that were seen by the visitors. And to my surprise, this was actually one of the 8 projects that were selected for the exhibit at the 9/11 tribute. If you go to New York and you go to the 9/11 memorial at Ground Zero, you will find our monument there. There's a digital board where you can see all the various monuments and tributes that were paid around the world, and you will see La Quinta. You can write actually a message and leave a message for everybody to read when they go to see the La Quinta artifact. So this was a proud moment for our community. Really pay tribute to all the donated money, time, resources, in-kind donation, the city council at the time, the city, the citizen. This was really a proud moment to be, in particular, for something this difficult to remember as the event of 9/11. My motivation to get involved at the very beginning, there were 2 things that occurred when, and I will try to do this without choking up. Andrew walked up and said, I lived all my life in the Cove, and immediately I thought about my son, that he was growing up in the Cove, and just like, as Andrew did. And so I thought that really touched me, because many projects come, but what is the will to make it happen? And Andrew had the will to make it happen. And the other part is, as most of you know, I'm a graduate of Pepperdine University, and Tom Burnett was one of the 4 gentlemen that attempted to take control of the flight that crashed in Pennsylvania. He was a graduate of the program. I graduated from different years. I didn't know him, but we do have a big memorial for him and the heroes of 9/11 at Pepperdine. So when Andrew brought this to City Council, it was really the obvious thing for me to do and the right thing for me to do to get involved. I would like to get some final remarks from Andrew and the rest of it. And then we'll do some Q&A.
Well, after reliving all of that, just going step by step is definitely brought back memories of everything that we had to go through all the fundraising, all the hurdles that we had to overcome, and just the time that it took. But the thing that I really have to really say is that this is one of the only ones that we have in the entire country, and I think that's what makes it so much more than just a Eagle Scout project to me. And that's one of the things that I have to say.
I was just grateful to be part of the city of La Quinta and honored to serve our council in the community and be part of this project. A lot of emotion with this project. As Warner said, when the steel was first seen and people gasp, I mean, you really feel the weight of what happened and what a special piece we have. So Thank you, Andrew, for bringing this to the city, and thank you for council for making it happen, and thank you for citizens for supporting it and funding it. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mayor Linda Evans, City of La Quinta, and we want to welcome you to our 6th Vigil, recognizing the tragedy of 9/11. This is clearly a day of remembrance, and we appreciate all of you coming out to be part of this emotional celebration, vigil, remembrance, time of thanks. And we're going to hear from a few dignitaries today, and I know many of you will think back of where you were on that day. This is again our 6th year of holding this, although it's our 5th anniversary of actually having the final statue here in front of us. I'd like to introduce my fellow council members, Councilmember and Mayor Pro Tem Kathleen Fitzpatrick, Councilmember John Pena. John was the mayor on 9/11. And we did an event earlier this evening at the museum, and it was the story of how this statue was made, a large part due to Councilmember Robert Ratty before he was on the city council. And former Mayor Adolph was with us, who was the mayor at the time when we did the original dedication, and was proud to be part of council at the time. We also have Councilmember Steve Sanchez with us this evening. I want to recognize and introduce Assembly Member for the 42nd District, our friend Chad Mays. And of course, our Riverside County Sheriff, Sheriff Stan Sniff. Sheriff's father, Stan Sniff Sr., was a long-standing member of our city council, 25 years serving our community on city council. And in the lake, almost right behind you, you'll see a statue, and that represents, and that's a dedication of Councilmember Stan Sniff. And Riverside County Fire Chief Dan Talbot's joining us this evening. And then we have a few folks, I'm going to get through all the intros in the audience so we can kind of launch into the program, but we are very well represented and very safe this evening with representation from our Riverside County Sheriff. We have visiting from Riverside County, Deputy Chief Brandon Ford is in the audience. Brandon Ford, yes, thank you. And our own Chief of Police here in the City of La Quinta, Misty Reynolds. And we also have our Assistant Police Chief, and that's Mike Tapp. We have representatives from Supervisor Manuel Perez's district, and that would be Victoria Lort. And we also have representative from Congressman Dr. Raul Ruiz's office, and that's Peter Karlstrom. Thank you. And this is really very typical of La Quinta and community, because we have strong representation from our commissioners who dedicate their time on events, on boards, on activities, on decision making. And they have a sign-in sheet. Thank you very much, because I tend to miss them. So Doriel Weiler, who's in community services. We have Linda Williams, who is our president of the Historical Society, who's over here. Phil Betancourt, part of our planning commission, and they just concluded a meeting early so they can be part of the ceremony. George Badovec and his wife, and they're from the Financial Advisory Commission. George is, not Ellen. Ellen Strong. And we have the Quills, Dory and Paul Quill, both serve on commissions, long-time La Quinta residents. Thank you very much. Kevin McCune, who is part of our planning commission, landscape architect. Where is he? He's in the back. All right, thank you very much, currently chair. And I gave a tour earlier of some Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts, and Joe Johnson was in City Hall. He's on our housing commission. I don't know if Joe's somewhere in the audience. All right, raise your hand if I've missed you. Hey, okay, very good. I also want to thank and acknowledge the Boy Scouts and the Cove Neighborhood Association for always being part of this in terms of the colors. The La Quinta High School Wind Symphony Brigade, the traveling high school music team that is involved in so many of our events here at La Quinta, and it makes a big difference. And we also want to recognize Troop Cub Scout Den 105 and Boy Scout Troop 105 Raise your hands, guys, okay? They toured City Hall with Councilmember Sanchez and I and Assistant Police Chief Tapp just before this ceremony as part of their Scout learning assignment, and so we thought this is a perfect opportunity to see a little bit about what's going on. That is why we converged on the Planning Commission meeting and sat in on the village parking study subject matter, and then brought them over here so they can learn a little bit of history about America, since obviously they were not around during that time. So, for those of you not standing, if you would please stand. We all remember where we were that morning, what we were doing, what we were thinking, the shock, what we were feeling. Think about that. What we were feeling when that happened. That day forever changed America, and that tragedy brought our nation together even more. The strength grew, and that strength and unity continues to grow with every passing day. For many of you, you may wonder, why does La Quinta recognize and celebrate and do a vigil on 9/11? And how did this memorial get created? Well, first of all, I mentioned the beauty of the Historical Society and the museum teamed up with Robert Ratty and just did a making of the 9/11. But what happened was, on January 4th of 2011, Andrew Davis, a local Boy Scout, let me call out Andrew. Andrew, come up a little bit so you can wave to the crowd. I told the other guys you were going to be here tonight. Here. Andrew made a presentation to the City Council requesting a 9/11 memorial to be built within our city. The memorial would be focused around a piece of steel from the World Trade Center. The idea and the development of the memorial was part of his Eagle Scout project. Okay, boys, we've got high standards now. And he had a connection to the event because of his father. His father was there on business, and his father was supposed to be in those buildings that day, but he left early. That obviously resonated until he knew that his father was safe, and that did not happen to him. And he realized this is what happened. There are other boys and girls that lost their dads that day. So he came back and said, we cannot forget this. We need to do something in my community to forever remember this day because of the way it made you feel. Right?
Yeah.
Anything you want to share?
It's,
Go on, microphone, please.
thank you.
We're flexible.
I remember seeing my mom cry when she was watching the news of what happened. I was young, I didn't know exactly what was going on until I was explained what happened. And it meant a lot when I was starting as a Boy Scout, and I never really knew what I wanted my Eagle project to do, but I knew I wanted it to mean something. So in return, I wanted it to mean something to me. And in return, if I knew if it meant something to me, it would mean something to my community. And that's what I did. I remember when I was doing one of my fundraisers at Red Robin, with the help of the city of La Quinta, there's a woman that I met who said that she lost her daughter in the World Trade Center. She didn't get to ever recover her body. But she said that this memorial is her grave to remember her by. And later I found out today that she has a tree over there, which I'm very grateful that she has. But was a lot of work to build this, but I'm happy that I did. Because seeing you guys all come out here today, it truly shows how strong our community is and how well we can stick together through the tough times. That's all I have to say.
So the Port Authority of New York then created this special program where cities and counties were allowed to actually request a piece of steel from the World Trade Center for public memorials. And each approved agency would have to arrange and fund the shipment. That's where the story is. And Ron, are you sharing some of that story in your segment? So it was a combo effort. He presented to City Council. We said, we love this concept. Let's start figuring out how to raise the money for it. He raised a lot of money on his own. He did community events. The Art and Public Places Fund with the City Council and the city budget helped out as well. We had, I'll get into that in a little bit. We had pre-council members help, we had local community folks help, and it was a team effort with our city staff to pull this all together. So it wasn't until he requested this on January 4th, and on June 28th is when we were approved for that piece of steel to be shipped to our city. But again, all of the people involved in this were not primarily the city, but everything needed to then come to the city. So we, again, embraced the concept, and Robert paid for the shipping to get it out here and helped design the art piece. And that was just filmed, so you'll be able to see that online in the not too distant future. So Andrew raised about $14,000. The city appropriated about $33,000 again from our Art and Public Places. And then what you see today is the end result of that creation. And Werner Bircher, who was the general contractor and a neighbor of Andrew's, he worked very closely with Robert and Andrew and the staff on helping create design, and he actually constructed it. And that's a fascinating story because I didn't learn about the details of that until tonight's presentation to the museum, so taking away another special moment as well. So our dedication ceremony then began to unveil the memorial, and that was in September of 2013. And that's when our candlelight vigils began. And this annual event, obviously, it continues to grow, and we want it to be open to everybody. We want it to be available, and this is why it's in our public park, that you can see and be with the statue and think about those times every day and be thankful for the community we live in and how great our country is. We want to ensure that we honor those we lost, and we want to continue to remind everyone about what happened that day, especially our youth. So thank you, Scouts and Cubs, for being here tonight, and what this day again means to America. So I'm going to invite each of our council members to come up and say a few words. We'll start with Mayor Pro Tem Kathleen Fitzpatrick.
Good evening. Just very briefly, as the mayor said earlier, we who are old enough remember exactly where we were the moment we learned of the attacks on our nation. We were amazed by the worst day of our life. We remain amazed at the bravery and the humanity and the courage and the honor shown that day by the first responders and the citizens alike. This memorial honors them all in spirit. We must remain united in action to honor them with continued respect, care, and support in the years that come. Please remember the spirit of the nation that drove all of us in those harrowing days following 9/11 in 2001. Continue on a mission of unity, not only tonight locally, but throughout our wonderful country, truly honoring the memory of the people we lost that day in the best possible way. Thank you all for coming out. La Quinta is a wonderful place.
Well, once again, it's my pleasure to be here. As Linda mentioned, Mayor Evans mentioned, I was mayor at the time 9/11 happened. It was one of those mornings where I got a phone call, and it was Sheriff Smith's dad, who was on the council at that time. He said, "Turn on the TV." And I said, "What channel?" He said, "Any channel." And as you turned it on, the horror that was unfolding before our eyes at that time was just unimaginable. We knew at that time that it was a terrorist attack. We were under attack from some form, somewhere. We didn't know where. And I think it was the first time that we had ever activated our emergency operations center. And I want to say a great thank you to the first responders, not only the ones that are here, but to those who responded in New York and in Washington, D.C., and in Pennsylvania as well, too. And the very brave citizens who took it upon themselves to help where they could. There's no room in our society for terrorism, ever. And to those families who suffered tremendous loss that day and ongoing, I heard on the news today that there are continuing deaths from 9/11, from the first responders who responded to the people who worked there. With all of the toxic fumes that were there, they continue to die from cancer. But a great thank you to our first responders. They're absolutely brave individuals. They leave their families at times not knowing where they're going or what's going to happen or what the circumstances are. And to their families as well too, we thank them for letting them do the job that they love. Again, thank you for coming tonight.
Good evening, everyone. It's 9/11 Memorial and native New Jerseyan. I was just in New Jersey a few days prior to that event, and you come back and I think we can all remember where we were that day, what we were doing, what we were eating, what we were thinking, how we were feeling, and I just remember thinking, oh, I was just there, wow, across the river, right into New York, from New Jersey, you can see, New York clearly, and you kind of take life for granted sometimes, right? And tragedies like this happen, you start thinking about, all the things that mean something to you, the people that mean something to you. It's just one of those times you want to just hug the person next to you and just remember to, be grateful for your friends and family that you have now, and always kind of, let them know you appreciate them, right? The mayor earlier posed the question, why do we celebrate or remember the 9/11 Vigil Memorial here in La Quinta, 3,000 miles away, right, other side of the country. But it's just that, it's still part of our country. We're Americans. And when our fellow Americans are attacked, we're all attacked. When our countrymen are wounded, we're all wounded. And so, an attack on our country anywhere, it's really an attack on all of us. And so that's why I remember, 9/11. It's my country, it's our country. It's by folks in the military and law enforcement and our firefighters. It's why we raise our hand and serve her, right? To protect her, protect everybody who's here, everybody everywhere. It's, two days are emotional for I think all of us. This one and 3 days, Memorial Day and Veterans Day, right? Because it means a lot, right? And so, thank you all for being here. Thank you for kind of teaching, I guess, our younger generations what this day is. And we often see the hashtag never forget, right? It's important, never forget.
I had the privilege to speak in front of you since before there was a memorial, and two things have changed. Words on my notes got bigger, and glasses are mandatory. Last year I had the pleasure or the privilege to visit the 9/11 Ground Zero with my family. And having been involved with this monument and this construction design, I thought I was ready to approach the site, but nothing will prepare you for that. As you approach and you see those fountains and those names. So La Quinta remembers. We remember the day the world watched as the essence of the character of the United States, a unique free nation based on democratic ideals and personal liberty, came under attack. A nation founded on the principle that all men are created equal. So a day when faceless and nameless cowards at the time caused death and devastation to our own land. Their act deserves no more mentioning. As a reflection on the 17th anniversary is meant to commemorate those we lost on the tragic day and the sacrifice of many brave men and women. The first responders who charged to the rescue with no regard for their own safety, and those who protected our freedom ever since. They are our true heroes. So many followed in their footsteps and are engaged at home and abroad daily to protect our principles of our country. Principles such as life, liberty, justice, unity, and the pursuit of happiness. Ideals that ended tyranny in 1776 and are so powerful that tyrants do fear these principles as much as they fear the strength of our military. Our military, police, firefighters, emergency and medical personnel are always in our prayers, especially on this day. And deserve our unwavering gratitude and deep respect for their service. We are because of what they do. These are no empty words, these are fundamental values we share from sea to shining sea. Never forget 9/11. That was the desire of Andrew Davis, who I had the pleasure to work with. A young man, still young, who undertook arguably one of the most ambitious Eagle Scout projects as a desire for present and future generations in our communities to learn and remember. Just consider the following. The majority of high school students were not born when this event took place 17 years ago. And as time passes, memories cannot be left to fade. Memories of hope against darkness, unity as a response to a coward act, love in the face of evil, and the endless pursuit of justice. The La Quinta 9/11 Memorial stands on this anniversary to help us remember. It stands as a symbol of unity, connecting with solemnity the events of the past with our bright future ahead. A future forged through the everlasting flame of the American spirit. The legacy of the 9/11 Memorial is just that. The goodwill of our community to never forget the victims, survivors, and heroes of September 11, 2001. Thank you for being here this evening. May God bless you. May He continue to bless our nation. May all those we lost in His eternal peace.
Good evening. It's my honor to be with you here tonight on behalf of the law enforcement community, certainly Riverside County Sheriff's Department, but all our allied agencies that wear either tan or LAPD blue or the tan and green of the Sheriff's Department, standing alongside our brothers and sisters in the fire service, as well as the paramedics. I think all of you understand that those in the law enforcement community understand just as well that this is really not a job as a first responder in law enforcement. Certainly the mortal danger that each of us face day in and day out that were alluded to in some of the earlier remarks face every single man and woman that ends up putting that uniform and badge on and goes forth to end up protecting each of you and throughout our communities. And certainly today, as it's been indicated, this is the 17th anniversary of 9/11 and honoring those first responders that responded so heroically on that day. And all of us can remember where we were seated watching on television, no matter what channel, what was going on and trying to figure out when those first crash occurred and the second one. I, like many of you, were going, what is going on? Is this something random? And then of course we quickly found out that it wasn't. And I think all of us remember the heroic refrain, "Let's roll," out of the Flight 93 as they tried to recapture the control of that aircraft. And I think that it's important to remember the toll that it took on our nation. And many of you will know just a few years ago, in December 2015, we had the same terrorist type of incident strike close here in the Inland Empire. So nobody seems to be safe in this day and age. There are no extraordinary men, just extraordinary circumstances that ordinary men and women today are forced to deal with. And that seems to be the refrain about our first responders, whether in fire service or law enforcement community, and really the military as well. Running to the crisis, the problem, the danger that others rightfully run away from. And that really defines our first responders and our military. So many ordinary men and women became extraordinary on 9/11 17 years ago. And has also been alluded to over and over at this ceremony and other ceremonies across our great county. Many of you remember the famous philosopher George Santayana in 1905, who indicated, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." And that's a refrain that all of us need to end up wearing close to our hearts, because the price of liberty, just like the price of protection from terrorism, is eternal vigilance. But we also want to, as I close tonight, we also want to end up thanking those young men and women that today entered the law enforcement and fire service first responder field, that had the courage to put on that badge today, don that uniform, and head the calls that those others that we talked about run away from or go in the opposite direction. The threats to our communities, yours, mine, all across this county, and really all across our nation, is still very, very real. And that eternal vigilance is critical for all of us. So my request of each of you is, let's honor the heroes of yesterday that we're honoring tonight, but let's also honor the heroes of today that still stand ready to this in this very moment in the fire, police, and paramedic service and our U.S. military, to pass in the face of mortal peril to protect us all from those that mean evil and harm to each and every one of us. Let us hope that we'll continue to have new ones willing to join our ranks and serve our communities and serve each of you. God bless, and thank you for coming out this evening. And speaking of our brothers and sisters in the fire service, this is Fire Chief Dan Talbot, and I'm pleased to introduce him alongside me. Thank you.
Good evening. It is my honor to speak to you today. I would like to thank the sheriff, all the elected dignitaries, and you for coming out this evening. This is an auspicious occasion, without doubt. September 11th is a historical day. I remember in my youth that I spoke to my grandmother and my great-grandmother about December 7th, 1941, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. I remember listening to them and learning from them about what that day meant to them and how that day had affected them and had altered the course of our nation and the world's history. President Roosevelt at that time said it was a day that would live in infamy. I always wondered that if me or my generation would have such an event, had the world changed so much that we wouldn't have to face that. On September 11th, that question was answered. On that day, as had been previously stated, a group of cowards attacked our nation. At the dawn of a new century and a new millennium, our fate was being changed by faceless, nameless cowards who fear and hate what we stand for: individual liberty and freedom. But similar to December 7th, 1941, this nation rose up. It stood strong. We saw it not only in the first responders at Ground Zero, police, fire, and EMS, but in our United States military. Our president at the time said, "We will not falter. We will not tire. We will not fail." And we have not, because of the courage, strength of our nation, of our community, and of our values. Like I said, I remember that day clearly. I was on duty at the fire station in Palm Desert. I saw on live TV the second plane hit. I was concerned. I was worried for the fate of the nation I knew was at stake. Also that day, working for me was a man by the name of Jerry Salmon, who's recently retired, a 30-year firefighter. He and other members of California Youth SAR Task Force 6 responded to Ground Zero. And they went there and they performed their duty. They performed it admirably along the FDNY and the multiple other USAR task forces that were assembled that day. And President Bush, standing at the tower several days later, informed the crowd that the people who had taken down those towers were going to hear from us and hear from us soon, and they did. And some of the bravest men and women of our generation, of this nation, have paid the ultimate sacrifice to ensure that we can assemble here today. And to them, we all owe a great debt of gratitude. So I am going to close my remarks by saying once again, it is my honor to be here and speak to you today. God bless the United States.
You have a wonderful mayor and a wonderful council that understands the importance of events like this. And as Councilmember Sanchez had pointed out, and as I was looking before he'd said it over here to these guys, you don't think about it, but these guys don't remember what happened on 9/11 because they weren't here when 9/11, they weren't born yet. And you know, over the years we've had different events, just like this one. And you know, when I was asked to say a few words, my first reaction was to wonder what hasn't been said. After all these years, what hasn't been said about the lives torn apart, the mothers and fathers widowed far too early, the children orphaned, the thousands of lives lost because of hate. And I'm not sure I can add much more to that story that hasn't already been told and was so articulately said just moments ago. So maybe it's important that we reinforce what the story was, the overall highlight, the theme of the story. Because on a day like today, we should refuse to give any credence to those that were driven by hatred. We should choose to focus on those that were driven by love. As it was said in the book of John, greater love hath no one than this, that a man would lay down his life for his friends. And so today, let us acknowledge the power of love in the worst of times. First, we will always remember the victims and their loved ones, but let's remember the first responders who risked everything, including their own life, because of love. Those that sifted through the rubble looking for life, they did so because they loved. And a country that came together and was united in the aftermath because of love. So today, as we remember, let's remember to love. Good evening and God bless.
Fit right in here. We're all about loving La Quinta and loving everything about our community. Thank you very much. Andrew earlier mentioned the encounter that he had with the mother at Red Robin while he was raising funds for the monument statue. And we want to acknowledge the tree with the white bow, which is, you have a fire truck facing the background there, was donated in memory of Janine Damiani Jones by the Marciano and Damiani family. Janine was a 28-year-old bond broker with Cantor Fitzgerald when her life was cut short tragically on that September 11, 2001 day. Her family and friends described her as an intelligent, fun-loving, loyal, hardworking, beautiful, and extremely generous woman. She was very successful in her career and achieved partner status after 5 years with her firm. But she was also able to fulfill many goals that she set for herself. But despite those accomplishments, she never forgot to be truly successful as a person. It was her love and respect of her family and friends that mattered most to her and made a big impact on their lives. She is missed every day and will also never be forgotten. At this time, I'd like to invite you to light your candles, if not already lit. Let me grab mine.
or if I do, actually use my phone.
And we are going to take our moment of silence. No statue, monument, or the amount of tears could ever replace the losses that we suffered on that September day. With this memorial, the stories, the thoughts, the feelings serve as a reminder to all of us that the American spirit is alive and well in La Quinta and throughout our country. And even in the face of tragedy, we have the ability to unite and be strong and prevail. On behalf of the City Council and other dignitaries, we want to thank you for attending this evening's vigil. And we want you to have a blessed night. God bless America. Amen. Thank you.